Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're doing something a little different. We're going beyond the typical resume.
Hmm.
Yeah, to explore the life of Chris Westland. Now, you know how sometimes you stumble across someone's bio
Hmm.
and it's just different?
Yeah.
That's Chris Westland for you?
It is.
His personal website is really, it's more than just a list of accomplishments.
Yeah.
It paints this incredible picture and weaves together history, family, and some seriously forward-thinking ideas.
Yeah. You know what struck me the most was how his story intersects with major historical events. It's like a living timeline, starting from his birth in 1949
Oh, wow.
to a world he describes as vastly different from our own.
In 1949, that really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay, so right off the bat, Westland mentions being the first in his family to pursue academia.
Right.
But when you look at his background, it's almost like a movie, a blend of military tradition and, well, salesmanship.
That's a fascinating contrast. His grandfather was a World War I veteran who helped with European reconstruction efforts after the war.
Really?
He spoke 9 languages.
Oh, my gosh.
And that seems to be just the tip of the iceberg. Westland's father's side of the family boasts a Silver Star recipient and West Point graduates.
It's like everyone in his family has done something amazing.
His aunt was one of the first women in the Navy.
Imagine that.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's incredible.
I'm getting the sense that service and global perspectives were deeply ingrained in his family. You know, it's not just the accomplishments, it's the sheer scope of experiences his family had.
Right.
His father, for instance, an Army Air Force boxing champ, who later became a sales manager at Westinghouse.
I mean, come on.
I know.
How do you have that happen all in one lifetime?
Right.
It's amazing.
And we can't overlook the fact that both of Westland's parents were polio survivors.
Yeah.
He reflects on that experience as a reminder of how much progress we've made. We live in what he calls an age of miracles, and it's easy to forget the challenges people faced just a generation or two ago.
Absolutely. We take it for granted now.
I know.
The medical advancements that we have, we just expect them to be there.
Right. And he specifically mentions his father contracting polio during the 1952 epidemic.
Oh, wow.
And here's something that struck me. Westinghouse actually supported him through his recovery and found him a new role in Indiana.
Wow.
It speaks volumes about corporate culture back then.
It does. Can you imagine that level of commitment
Wow.
from a company today? It's a different time, no doubt. But thinking about Westland growing up with these stories, these figures, it must have had a profound impact on him.
Absolutely.
The discipline, resilience, the global outlook, it sets the stage for a very particular worldview, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how those early influences might have shaped his path.
Right.
And speaking of shaping paths, his education is a whole other chapter.
Oh, yeah.
He describes it as rich and flexible, almost impossible to replicate today.
I can only imagine.
And the details, well, they're almost unbelievable.
Well, let's hear them.
Okay, Sue,
Lay it on me.
picture this, a grade schooler
Okay.
attending chemistry and biology classes at Indiana University.
No way.
Not just observing, actively participating.
What?
He even had a paramecium zoo at home,
What?
a collection from a lab where James Watson,
Get out.
yes, the DNA Watson had studied.
This is unbelievable.
I know.
This is like something out of a movie or something,
No.
like a Prodigy or something.
The level of access and trust back then is astonishing. Emperor Hirohito of Japan visited those same biology labs while Westland was there. It was a different world.
A completely different world.
Right, and the pace of his learning was incredible. He tackled high school chemistry in 4th grade,
Oh my gosh.
finished high school math by 7th grade,
Wow.
and was already taking college courses at IU.
That's insane.
Then in his junior year of high school, he has late-night access to IU's control data 6400 computer,
What?
a pretty powerful machine for that time.
That's incredible.
It makes you think about the potential benefits and drawbacks of such an unconventional approach.
It does.
The freedom to explore, to delve into subjects that fascinated him, but also the lack of structure we're so accustomed to today. What role did trust and mentorship play in nurturing his learning? It's a fascinating question.
Really is. It makes you think about how different things were back then and how maybe in some ways they were better, in some ways maybe they were worse. But you can't argue with the results.
Right. And this guy was amazing. I mean, it really makes you wonder, what would we gain or lose with that level of freedom in education today?
Yeah.
I mean, we have structured curriculums for a reason, but there's something to be said for encouraging that kind of self-directed exploration, isn't there?
Absolutely. It speaks to the potential of individual initiative and the power of mentors who can recognize and nurture that kind of passion.
Yeah.
And Westland's journey certainly highlights the impact of those early influences.
So with all that under his belt, Westland graduates from Indiana University with a degree in statistics.
Yeah.
But back then, statistics wasn't seen as a very practical field. No computers or massive databases like we have today.
Exactly. It was a different era. So he ended up pursuing an MBA in accounting, worked as a CPA for Douche Ross in Chicago, and gained valuable industry experience. You can almost see how those seemingly disparate paths, statistics and accounting, might start to connect in his mind.
It's like he's laying the groundwork for his future work without even realizing it. And then he makes this fascinating turn back to academia. He goes for his PhD at the University of Michigan under the mentorship of Manfred Kochen. And for anyone interested in networks and connections, this is where things get really interesting.
Kochen is a legend. He co-authored the 6 Degrees of Separation paper. You know, the idea that everyone is connected by 6 degrees or less. It's a concept that's had a huge impact on pop culture and how we think about social networks.
Yeah, I remember that. It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
The interconnectedness of everything. And Kochen himself had some serious connections. He was John von Neumann's last research assistant and was also instrumental in bringing Benoit Mandelbrot, the father of fractal geometry, to IBM's New York labs. Talk about an impressive lineage.
It really is. Westland was surrounded by these brilliant minds. His dissertation focused on semantic networks, which is essentially the study of how information is organized and interconnected with meaning. This was back in the 80s, long before the modern internet as we know it.
Right. And he even mentions that his work ties into Tim Berners-Lee's vision of Web 3.0, making the web more intelligent and interconnected. So he was essentially laying the groundwork for what many believe is the future of the internet. It's incredible to think about those early connections.
It's a great example of how seemingly disparate fields can converge in unexpected ways. And it speaks to the power of having a diverse set of experiences. Westland's background in statistics accounting and his exposure to these groundbreaking thinkers, it all fed into his understanding of how information could be structured and used.
Okay, so we've talked about his education, his early career path, but what about his personal life? We know he met his wife Randa while at the University of Michigan and that they have 3 children. He briefly mentions their time in Hong Kong and the birth of their son Brendan. But what else can we glean about his family life?
There isn't a lot of detail on his website, but the fact that he returned to the U.S. to be closer to his children and grandchildren speaks volumes. Family clearly plays a significant role in his life. And given his global perspective, his travels, his exposure to different cultures, I imagine those family dinners must be filled with fascinating stories and insights.
I can picture it now. It's a reminder that behind every academic or researcher, there's a whole world of personal experiences that shape their thinking. It's all interconnected.
Exactly. And speaking of interconnectedness, let's talk about Westland's journey into the world of academia. It's fascinating how his entry into the field coincided with a major shift in the landscape of information systems.
Yeah, you're right. He starts out when it's all about COBOL and slow-moving projects. Then things explode in the mid-90s with the rise of data analytics and machine learning. We'll talk about being ahead of the curve. It's almost as if his career path was mirroring the evolution of the field itself.
And it underscores the importance of staying curious and open to new ideas throughout one's career. Westland's background in statistics, which might have seemed impractical at one point, suddenly became incredibly relevant. It's a valuable lesson for anyone in any field.
Absolutely. So we've talked about his family, his education, his early career, but I'm curious, what were his experiences like once he entered the world of academia?
Well, Westland describes the academic landscape when he first entered as being quite different from what we might imagine today. He talks about a field dominated by, and I quote, crusty old curmudgeons who were resistant to new technologies and stuck in their ways. It's almost like he was a bridge between 2 eras, bringing his fresh perspective and his industry experience to a field that was ripe for disruption.
It's fascinating how individual personalities can shape entire fields, isn't it? It's like Westland was a catalyst for change. So what were some of the specific changes he witnessed in those early years?
Well, from the mid-1990s onwards, there was a noticeable shift. The field began to embrace statistics, data analytics, and machine learning areas that were perfectly aligned with Westland's own expertise. It wasn't just a coincidence either. It was a reflection of the broader technological advancements happening at the time, the rise of the internet, the explosion of data, the increasing power of computers. It was a perfect storm for the field to evolve, and Westland was right there in the thick of it.
And his journey takes him from the University of Southern California, where he received tenure and worked with Barry Boehm's renowned software labs, to Hong Kong University of Science and Technology in 1995. What prompted this move? Was it a deliberate decision to immerse himself in a completely different cultural context?
It's hard to say for sure, but it certainly speaks to his adventurous spirit and his willingness to embrace new challenges. In Hong Kong, he delved into executive education, public speaking, and even began writing business books. He was exposed to a whole new world of thought leaders and influencers. In fact, he mentions a friend who arranged speaking engagements for him, who also handled Asian tours for Bill Clinton, Colin Powell, and Mahathir Mohamad.
Wow, let's talk about being in the right circles.
Yeah.
It's incredible to think about the connections he made during that time. And I imagine living in Hong Kong, experiencing that dynamic culture firsthand, must have had a profound impact on his understanding of global economics and information systems. What were his observations about that period?
He describes China's economic rise during his 12 years in Hong Kong as one of the most remarkable and successful periods in history. He witnessed firsthand the incredible transformation taking place and gained valuable insights into how technology was driving this growth. It must have been an incredible time to be there at the heart of such rapid change and innovation.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most valuable learning happens outside of the traditional classroom or research lab. Real-world experience, immersion in different cultures, these are all critical pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the value of stepping outside of our comfort zones and embracing new perspectives. It's something we can all learn from.
So after 12 years in Hong Kong, he and his family decide to return to the U.S. to be closer to their children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
Seems like a full circle moment, doesn't it?
Mm.
From his unconventional childhood in the Midwest to his global adventures, it's all led him back to his roots.
It's a beautiful reminder that no matter how far we wander or how diverse our experiences become, there's always a sense of grounding in family and connection. And it makes you wonder, what are the lasting impacts of a life like Westland's? What are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, it really is amazing to consider the full arc of his journey. We've gone from a childhood steeped in family history and an almost unbelievable education to a career that's mirrored the evolution of information systems. And it strikes me that one of the biggest takeaways here is the power of connecting diverse experiences.
Yeah, that's a great observation. His family background, his academic pursuits, his industry work, his time in Hong Kong, all of these seemingly separate threads come together to weave a tapestry of knowledge and insight.
It makes you wonder what would happen if he hadn't had that flexible education, or if he hadn't taken that detour into accounting. Would he have ended up on the same path?
It's impossible to say for sure, but it does highlight how those twists and turns in our lives can actually be incredibly valuable. Sometimes the most unexpected experiences lead to the greatest insights.
And I think that's a really empowering thought for our listeners. We all have these unique sets of experiences, and it's in those intersections, those seemingly unrelated areas where true innovation can happen.
Absolutely. Westland's story reminds us that knowledge isn't confined to a single discipline or experience. The more connections we make between different areas, the more comprehensive and nuanced our perspective becomes.
Yeah, it's like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Right.
But in a good way.
Exactly.
It sparks curiosity and a desire to keep learning and exploring.
Exactly. And I think Westland's story leaves us with a really intriguing challenge. What are the deep dives we can take in our own lives? What seemingly unrelated experiences or areas of knowledge can we connect to gain a richer understanding of the world around us?
After learning about his family history, I'm actually inspired to do some digging into my own family tree. Who knows what fascinating stories and connections I might uncover?
That's the beauty of it. We all have unique stories waiting to be explored. It could be your family history, a specific scientific field, a historical event, a cultural phenomenon. The possibilities are endless.
And the tools are readily available. We have so much information online, not to mention libraries, archives, and personal accounts from people who've lived through incredible times.
The key is to approach these explorations with the same curiosity and openness that Westland seems to embody. Don't be afraid to make connections between seemingly disparate fields or ideas. Embrace the unexpected.
And who knows? Maybe our own deep dives will lead to discoveries or insights that we can share with the world, adding our own threads to the tapestry of human knowledge.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating life of Chris Westland. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep diving deep.